Hello friends. Welcome to the Fiction Quest. How are you all? So in this video, we will see what if Naruto become the deity god and fell in love with Rangiku Matsumoto. But before we start, if you want more amazing stuff like this, then be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video. Also, if possible, share this video with your friends. Now without wasting any more time, let's begin the story. Naruto stared out at the world before him in shock. He never expected it to become this bad. He assumed he and his friends would march to war and come out together, not unscathed, but alive. He assumed they'd return to their daily goof-offs, eating their fill to ramen, and then finally ask Hinata out. Looking back on it, he realized how naive he was. War was not without casualties, not without death. If it was, well, it was not a war. And, unfortunately, the Fourth Shinobi War had the greatest casualties in history. Out of all the residents, out of the thousands and millions of people residing in the elemental nations, he was the only one left alive. And it was his entire fault. It all started after his 18th birthday and the completion of his training with Killer Bee. When they went to leave the island they trained on, they were stopped by the very shinobi they were allied with. Since Killer Bee and he were the last Jinchuriki, they had been given the order to stay there. They justified this order by saying that this was for their protection from Madara. But they knew that they just didn't want them falling into the Uchiha founder's hands like the rest. And if they thought that Madara would stop with such a small number of Chunin and Junin surrounding the island, they were idiots. However, just a few was all that was needed. The villages knew this. Naruto and Killer Bee loved their villages and would never harm them unless it need be. Many times they tried to persuade them. Many times had they tried to let them leave and join the fight, and time again they failed. One day, Madara appeared. He slaughtered his way through the ninja until he reached Killer Bee and him. Naruto wanted to take him together, but Killer Bee had another idea. Without even asking the blonde, Killer Bee used the Hachibi's power to send Naruto far away from Madara. When Naruto awoke, he just knew that his surrogate brother was dead. He could feel it, and Kyuubi confirmed it when he said he felt the Hachibi's chakra running free. Killer Bee was dead, the Hachibi was free. Madara had 8 of the 9 Biju under his control, and Naruto was furious. He wanted Madara's head on a silver platter. When he had arrived at the battlefield littered in corpses and painted red in the blood of many, he immediately went to find his friends. What he found, however, immediately turned his fury into sorrow. Half of his friends were dead and they were losing. After mourning their loss and being scolded for being there by many of the cages, he was able to join the fight. It wasn't long before Kabuto appeared and sent the ninja he resurrected at their still tired forces. He had been ordered to stay put, but who did they think he was? He was Naruto. He didn't stay put. He charged the forces stocked up on nature chakra while Kakashi confronted Kabuto. They battled the resurrected ninja for hours, knowing that as long as they kept coming, then Kakashi hadn't yet defeated the wannabe Orochimaru yet. Finally, when they did stop coming, he felt dread in his heart. He couldn't feel Kakashi's chakra. He ran to where the silver-haired man had battled the snake and found them both dead. Kakashi's mask ripped off, showing off a content and smiling face, a hole where his heart should be. Kabuto was unrecognizable, ripped from every limb of his body. Naruto felt like he deserved more than that, though. They were able to mourn for 2 days, sealing the body in a scroll so they could bury him next to his father back in Konoha. During those days, Sakura wouldn't leave his side. He was a form of comfort for her during these times. Sasuke left and now Kakashi was gone forever. She needed something to grasp and Naruto gladly let her. Hinata was his form of comfort. Despite what he showed on the outside, he needed it. She saw through his mask and came to him one night and let him cry it away. Enko had confronted him the next day as well. She had a mask of her own so she could spot one a mile away. The 2 girls became his comfort during the time where his sensei's death was fresh in his mind. Sakura was soon confessed to by Lee. She was reluctant at first, not wanting to get close to anyone and lose them again, but Naruto pushed her towards it. She agreed, but still hadn't left Naruto's side, and Lee understood this as he'd already lost guide to Sasori. Finally, the newly revived Akatsuki came, armed and ready to slaughter all who stood in their way and to capture the last remaining Jinchuriki. He had confronted Pain alone, as only he had defeated him in the past. Sakura and Lee went for Sasori while the others split the rest of the remaining Akatsuki up between themselves, mostly trying to overwhelm them with numbers. Itachi was nowhere to be found. It was hard to fight Pain this time as it was the real him, not the corpse puppets he used to use. The man's Rinnegan was stronger than ever and he never relented in his attacks. At first Naruto wondered why he was attacking with the Akatsuki when he noticed that the man's eyes had no shine. He was being controlled. Naruto added this as another point to his reasons to hate Madara and the Uchiha list. When Naruto was caught in the Shinra Tenshi, he thought he was a goner. He had closed his eyes and waited for the impact, hoping that Kyuubi could heal whatever happened to him. When he felt no pain but a body in front of him, he opened his eyes and was horrified with what he saw. Anko. She had the pull pain used through her chest, blood dripping from her lips. Seeing this, Pain seemed to gain some control as the shine returned long enough for him to remove the weapon from the purple-haired woman and jump back before they lost all life again. Anko had fallen into his arms, her breath growing shallower and shallower as she looked up and smiled at his horrified face. When he asked why she did this, her answer was simple. "You share my pain." She died in his arms. He stared at her lifeless body for a while, not believing she was gone. When he snapped out of his shock, he felt his fury rise and Kyuubi stirring in the seal. He let out a roar of rage that echoed from the tips of his toes up and shaking the ground beneath him at its power. Naruto felt his eyes burn and bleed. He had watched Pain's lifeless eyes widen as he whispered, "The Rinnegan," in a barely audible tone. If he hadn't been so blinded in rage, he might have stopped to think about what that meant. He would have discovered he had unlocked the Namikaze legacy, the Rinnegan. He attacked Pain with all he was worth, tearing him limb from limb and not caring if the man was being controlled. He killed Anko, the same woman who was there for him, there to comfort him, and one of the only people who actually understood him. When he was finished, Pain was a barely recognizable blob of blood and flesh flung all over the ground. He had crawled over to Anko's corpse, clutched her, and then cried his eyes dry. Hinata had felt his rage and had rushed away from her battle and to him. When she saw what happened, she immediately scooped Naruto into her arms from behind and held him securely as he clutched Anko. Lee had more trouble fighting Sasori than Sakura did. Although she had the antidote to his poison, it could only do so much and she had little. Since Sakura had battled him before, it was easier, but she could no longer use the same tactics she had before to win, and Lee was a close combat user like her. Sasori was both that and a long-range user, so he had the upper hand. Lee became poisoned and collapsed with Sakura running towards him. Sakura held him while Sasori went in for the kill. Lee begged her to run, but Sakura wouldn't. She couldn't lose anybody else. As they braced for death, it never came. When they looked to see why, they saw Itachi standing before them with Sasori looking at the man wide-eyed before looking at his destroyed puppets. As the two watched, Itachi slaughtered Sasori easily without even getting a scratch. Once he wiped his hands of blood, Itachi walked over to them and knelt down before tossing Lee over his shoulder and walking towards the camp. Once the Akatsuki were defeated, with heavy casualties to the United Nations side as well, Itachi confessed that he was never really part of the Akatsuki and was a spy for Jiraiya. He told them the reasons he killed his clan and had hoped Sasuke wouldn't turn out like his past family members, only to be disappointed. He wanted to join them. He wanted to help end this madness once and for all, even if he died again. He was immediately accepted. Naruto had been appointed one of the acting leaders of the war and had caught the eye of the beautiful Mizukage, Terumi Mei. She had noticed that Naruto had hung around the sweet girl Hinata and the bloodlusting woman Anko. She confronted him once with Hinata around, curious about the blonde-whiskered boy. Once she got to talking to him, she was amazed by his kind yet stern attitude and found herself attracted to that. She was even more interested when he was resistant to her charms, the same charms that had every and all men bowing before her feet. From then on, Naruto wasn't seen without Mei or Hinata in his company. One day, he was confronted by Killer Bee's students and their team leader, Samui, Karui, and Omoi. They wanted to know about Bee's last moments. Naruto didn't want to tell them, but he did, knowing what it would be like if he didn't know the details about Kakashi's death. As they grieved and cried, he started talking to Samui, trying to cheer the woman up. She hid it very well, but he could tell she was hurt. Samui rarely left his side. Finally, Madara appeared. Many ninja foolishly charged in and died quickly while Madara's eyes were glued to Naruto, showing who he wanted to fight. Naruto did just that, ordered everyone to stand back while he activated his bloodline in Sage mode. For minuets they stood there, analyzing each other before they attacked. Sasuke had appeared next to the fight with that arrogant smirk on his face. He had told the girls that he would spare the hot and strong women when he was king. Along with Madara, they'd need heirs. If Naruto had time to process what he heard, he would have let out righteous fury, but his mind was focused on the Uchiha founder. Sasuke was surrounded by Sakura, Kiba, Ino, some Kumo and Kiri-nin, and finally Tsunade. They fought as well, trying to do their best with the mysterious earthquakes that rattled the ground beneath them. The first two to fall under Sasuke's power were the Kumo-nin, the Kiri-nin, Kiba, and Ino. Sakura and Tsunade teamed up, fighting their hardest against the last Uchiha before they became exhausted. When Sasuke was about to kill them, something hit him from behind. Lee, though not completely better from the poison, had hit Sasuke on the back of the head when he saw Sakura was in danger. The three stared at Sasuke's body, waiting for it to move. When it didn't, they proclaimed him unconscious. Sakura looked away as he was executed. When they looked back at Naruto's battle, they realized that the earth's quaking was caused by him and Madara. Gamabunta was out along with his fully grown children, fighting against the Biju relentlessly as Naruto and Madara hopped onto each one, fighting with all they had. It was a battle on such a level that the rest could only watch, praying that Naruto would win. During the fight, Naruto had tried to snap the Biju out of their control like Pain was able to do for a second. He recounted the things Kyuubi whispered into his ear, hoping that his words could save them. Unfortunately, the Biju remained under Madara's strong hold. Kyuubi then suggested something. It was suicide in a way, Naruto knew, but he realized it was the only way. Knocking Madara back with a burst of Kyuubi's chakra, he quickly drew two seals. He placed one over Kyuubi's seal and held the other one between his fingers as he started to chant and make hand seals. Madara, realizing what Naruto was doing, charged for Naruto. When he was merely a foot away, Naruto opened his slitted Rinnegan eyes and said two words that caused Madara to curse loudly. Shiki Fusion. The world drew still for a moment before a large burst of power blasted out of Naruto's body, pushing Madara back. With the Rinnegan at his disposal, the Shinigami wasn't needed. The Biju's bodies started to be pulled into the seal. Over the loud angry roars of the demons, Naruto barely heard his friends and comrades shouting his name and telling him to stop. Once they were all drawn in, Naruto collapsed onto his back and breathing heavily. Madara stood up with a look of pure fury on his face, glaring at Naruto with all he was worth before he attacked. He didn't, however, think that sand would protect the boy. Seeing this, Naruto gasped. He looked over at the shocked Gaara, who was standing with the rest of the people, showing that the man hadn't done it. There was only one other thing who could control sand like that: the Ichibi. He guessed that even demons were thankful to their saviors. With power flowing through his veins, he attacked Madara with all he was worth. This time, Madara didn't have the Biju on his side. Naruto did. It was quick after that, and Naruto destroyed him completely to be sure he wouldn't return anytime soon. After that, he collapsed. He awoke in the seal and immediately went to find Kyuubi and check on the other Biju. However, what he found wasn't 9 demons, he found one, and it had 10 tails, the Jubi. It seemed that bringing them all together combined them back into the original entity that the Sage of Six Paths split all those years ago. The demon had grinned evilly down at Naruto before giving an arrogant thanks to the boy. The demon had explained that since he'd never get out of Naruto's seal, he was going to make Naruto a Biju unmatched in power, while he would simply be residing in Naruto's mind like a conscience. Naruto refused outright, hating the idea. The Jubi, however, simply laughed and told him he had no choice. After that, Naruto felt the Jubi's power flood his system and mixing with his own abilities, overcoming him in pain. He felt 20 tails grow from his body and his ears move up his head and change shape. He felt claws and fangs grow. Finally the pain stopped. He had panted on the floor of his mindscape before he heard the Jubi's dreaded words. "It's not enough, you need more power." Pain overcame him once again. However, that wasn't the only feeling that overcame him. Dread. Suddenly, he couldn't feel Tsunade's presence anymore or some of the other ninja he'd felt before, yet he kept growing in power if the tails he was getting were any proof. Then, it hit him when he felt Sakura's presence disappear as well. The Jubi was stealing their lives, energy, and power to make him more powerful. He had screamed for the chuckling Biju to stop, screamed for him to spare them. The demon, however, simply smirked. More power. He kept whispering. Tears fell down his cheeks as he felt Hinata, Mei, and Samui disappear as well. He cried out to the sky, begging for Kami to simply kill him so the others would survive. Finally, he felt no one else on the battlefield, yet the power kept coming. The Jubi was stealing the lives of everyone in the elemental nations. Finally, the pain stopped when he reached 100 taels. He was weeping on the ground, begging for Kami to take his life in exchange for reviving the nations. He was thrown out of his mindscape after he saw a completely satisfied Jubi and his words. See you soon, little Hyakubi no Ukami. And now here he was, 100 wolf tails flowing behind him, wolf ears flat against his head, tears falling down his cheeks, and a helpless feeling as he stared at the corpses that littered the ground. Everyone was dead. He could always leave the nations and go to where those without chakra reside, but he could never leave his home. He collapsed onto the ground, weeping his heart out and crying for his friends and for his death. He stiffened when he felt arms wrap around him. It's all right, Naruto. I've got you. The voice made his eyes go wide. He turned and saw a transparent female figure and his tears increased. Hinata? He whispered. A mission to the world of the living? Yes, to Karakura Town. Karakura Town? Matsumoto Rangiku blinked, staring at her white-haired Taiko as he sipped his tea. Why? A relatively large hollow appeared and easily injured the one stationed there. He escaped, but the hollow is still wandering around. It was decided that a Fukataichu would be the one to deal with the problem until the station Shinigami is healed. I volunteered you. But why, Taiko? She whined, sticking out her bottom lip in hopes of changing his mind. As usual, the short boy didn't bat an eyelash at the display. You haven't done your paperwork in a month. His grip tightened on his teacup. You've been hiding sake in my desk. You threw a party in my office and forged the Sutaichu's signature and caused me to think we were in an emergency situation while you just laughed in the background, and you ask why I volunteered you. I need a vacation from you. Hitsugaya Toshiro said, trying to calm himself by taking another sip of his tea. Ah, Taiko, you're so mean, she complained, jumping over to him. Please have another Fukataichu do it. I cannot. Toshiro said, it's already been decided and confirmed. You're leaving at 6 tonight. 6? Taicho, I won't have time to prepare. This isn't a pleasure trip. Matsumoto. Toshiro shouted, slamming his cup onto the desk in front of him, making her jump. There's a dangerous hollow that has injured one of our own, from my division as well. I'm taking responsibility and sending you, and you will take this job seriously, do you understand? Her pout increased as her shoulders sagged in defeat. She nodded reluctantly and collapsed down onto the couch behind her. I understand, Taiko. He nodded at her in approval before pinching the bridge of his nose. He could feel another Matsumoto-induced headache forming again. Good. Now go prepare. Unlike someone, I take my work seriously. Wait. Matsumoto's eyes widened as a thought came to her mind. If I do go on this assignment, then I won't have to do or make up paperwork. A large smile formed onto her face. Yes. Don't even think about it, Matsumoto. How do you know, Taiko? A tick mark appeared on his forehead. How long have I served as your superior? I know you well, Matsumoto, and there's no way you're getting out of paperwork. When you return, you're going to finish it or I'll cut your funds for a while. She gasped at that, her face contorting in horror. But Taiko, I won't be able to go shopping if I don't have any money. Then it'll be a lesson for you to learn about work. You don't get paid for doing nothing, Matsumoto. Earn your paycheck. Her eyes glassed over at the thought of no shopping and, gasp, no money. Without them, then life wasn't worth living. She looked at her Taiko, whose face told him that he was completely serious in the subject, but what did she expect? This was Hitsugaya Toshiro, and he always kept his word. Do you understand, Matsumoto? Hi. She saluted, eyes burning with determination at the thought of losing her money. I'll go prepared to go to the world of the living to shop at all those luxurious stores. Wait, did I say that? I meant kill the hollow, she shouted, dashing out of the room. Matsumoto. Matsumoto dashed through the gate, running as fast as she could. She wanted to get to the other side as soon as possible. The sooner she got there, the sooner she could kill the hollow and the sooner she could go shopping. Not that she'd told her Taiko that, but she got the feeling that he somehow knew. How does her Taiko do these things? She stopped running when she heard a small bell chime and reached for her sword. With narrowed eyes, she quickly looked around before starting to run again. She didn't see anything, but she was certain she heard it. Ding! She spun around and stood wide-eyed. There before her was a large transparent figure dashing towards her. She gasped and started running, knowing anything that could infiltrate this place was powerful. Unfortunately, the world of the living was the only place she could get to, as the creature was blocking her way back to Soul Society. It took her a moment to realize that the walls around her were starting to narrow. She cursed. She had taken too long to get across. She started to hear the creature shriek as the walls pressed against it. She felt dread fill her stomach as she saw the exit that was quickly being covered. She pulled out her sword. She looked back and saw the creature dashing towards her, its sides being ripped from its being as it ran. She gasped and turned around, closing her eyes in pleading hope as she slashed the entrance. Her slash mark started to widen, showing the rift. She peeked back and saw the creature raise a claw. And, to avoid it, she did the only thing she could do. She jumped into the rift. She felt herself falling. Darkness surrounded her before it changed to an array of every color imaginable. She closed her eyes, hoping that wherever she landed she'd be alive. And at that moment, she hit something hard and her vision went black. "What?" Hitsugaya Toshiro shouted as he listened to Mayuri's report. All the other taikos were glaring at the man as well as he read the report. "You let an experimental hollow escape into the gate where Matsumoto was." "Calm yourself, Hitsugaya Taiko," Sutaichu Yamamoto said, though there was an edge of anger in his voice. Calm myself. My Fukataichu is missing because of his carelessness. And he shall be punished." "Why, can't you just find another Fukataichu?" Mayuri said, trying to weasel his way out of punishment. "It's not that easy, Mayuri," hissed Hitsugaya, glaring all his hatred onto the man. "Yes, Matsumoto is not easily replaced," Yukitaki said. "Don't forget, she's still alive, Mayuri," Hana said gently for Toshiro's sake. "Yes, but she's absent from her duties, so she should be replaced." "It's your fault that she's absent," Hitsugaya shouted as Zaraki Kenpachi had to hold him back from slicing the man into ribbons. "It's not my fault that your Fukitaku was incompetent," spat the white-skinned man. "What?" Hitsugaya screamed as he struggled in the spiky-haired man's arms. "How dare you say that about Matsumoto? She's more competent than you'll ever be." "Calm down, Toshiro," Yukitaki said, giving the small taiko a concerned look. "Yes, calm yourself," Yamamoto's voice echoed in the room. All eyes turned to him. "And Mayuri Taiko, stop antagonizing Hitsugaya Taiko. You will be punished for your actions." Mayuri glared at Yamamoto before sighing. There was no going against the Sutaicho, and even he knew that. He redirected his glare to the teal-eyed boy who eagerly shared the glare with just as much vigor. "Now, I want you to direct yourself to figuring out what has happened to our Fukitaku," Yamamoto said. "Find her." "Yes, sir," Mayuri said, walking out quickly. "And you, Hitsugaya Toshiro, need to calm yourself," the Sutaicho said. Hitsugaya pulled himself from Zaraki's grasp, straightened out his robes, and nodded. "I understand. I lost it and I apologize. And you lost it for an understandable reason. Go home and rest. But I need to search for Matsumoto. Rest for today, Hitsugaya Taiko, you'll need your strength for the search." The Sutaicho directed a grandfatherly look at the boy. "We'll find her, but you need to have a level head." Hitsugaya nodded, finding the floor very interesting. "I understand." Matsumoto awoke with a gasp, quickly checking herself for any injury. She raised an eyebrow when she noticed that she was wearing different clothes and that her stomach was bandaged. It was that moment that she realized that she was in a queen-sized bed covered in silk bedding. Confused, she quickly jumped up and reached for Hineka. When she didn't feel it, she felt panic take over as she started to search frantically for it. She dove to the floor and looked under the bed. She ran to the closet and peeked in. Lots of cute cloths, but there was no zanpakuto. She stomped her foot onto the floor and slammed the closet door shut. "Where are you?" she whined. She crossed her arms and turned towards the bed before her eyes lit up. Sitting on the dresser next to it was her sword. She danced over to it and picked it up before crushing it in a hug. She quickly went to strap it on but stopped when she remembered she was in different cloths. She looked around before spying just what she was looking for, a mirror. She walked over to it and her eyes widened at what she saw. She was wearing a beautiful teal dress that slid up the sides of her legs with side straps and showed off her massive cleavage. She blushed at it before smiling. She loved it. Twirling around happily, she flaunted herself in front of the mirror, laughing. When she heard a doorknob turn, she remembered her situation. Unsheathing Heineke, she pointed the blade towards the door while preparing for a fight if need be. Even if they gave her a completely adorable dress, she wasn't going to simply throw them into the safe pile. This could just be a scam to get her to let her guard down before they pounce. When the door opened, she saw a silver-haired man walking in with a book covering half his face. Matsumoto pictured her Taiko for a moment when she caught sight of untamable white hair before she hardened herself again, watching as a small blush formed onto the man's face and she scowled. He was probably reading something perverted. Noticing her, the man's single visible eye turned into an upside-down U, and placed a hand on the back of his neck sheepishly. He lowered his book, showing that the lower half of his face was covered by a mask. That's when she noticed the chain strapped to his chest. He was a soul. Sorry about that, I just got to this simply wonderful part in the story and I just couldn't put it down. How are you? She narrowed her eyes and shifted her blade around. She jumped at him with intent to console the man. Her eyes widened when the man's eyes hardened and he swiftly snatched the blade from her hands and spun her into an arm lock. Ma, let's calm down. Someone could get hurt if you swing this around like that. His eye curved again as he twirled the blade around with expert fingers. He released her and handed the blade back. She snatched it and jumped back with a cautious position. Why haven't you moved on? She asked. He blinked. You know I'm dead. Of course, it's my job to know. I'm a Shinigami, the lieutenant of the 10th Division of the Gotei 13, Matsumoto Rangiku. His eyes widened for a second before they narrowed again. You're a Shinigami. She nodded. He started examining her from head to toe. Even though she knew the man was probably a huge pervert due to the way he was reading the book, she could tell that his analyzing wasn't perverted. It was experienced and with an edge that came with time. She deemed him not ordinary. He stepped to the side. Come with me. Namikaze-sama would like to speak with you. She stared at him for a moment before nodding and cautiously walking out the door. For now she would have to participate with their demands until she knew where she was. A soul walking around so casually in the world of the living was rarely heard of. She followed the man who had returned to his book. She tried to look over his shoulder to see what he was so immersed in, but was shocked to see that it was a very old form of Asian writing. It was almost a combination of both Chinese and Japanese. All in all, she couldn't read a single word of it and it frustrated her. So, can you tell me about this place? She asked. It was obvious they were in some sort of castle if not a mansion. He shrugged his shoulders. Not much to tell. How about why a soul like you is simply wandering around not worrying about hollows attacking at any given moment? Hollows. Never heard of them. The man answered matter-of-factly, shocking her even more. If they're supposed to attack souls, then Namikaze-sama's aura is probably what's keeping them away. She felt her brain stop at that. Someone's aura was powerful enough to keep a horde of hollows away. Impossible. Just where had she ended up? Who are you? Me. I'm Hitaki Kakashi. Nice to meet you. And who's this Namikaze-sama? He's the leader of the spirit nations. He's our king and our guardian. He's simply Namikaze-sama. I don't understand. Matsumoto screamed, frustrated in her mind, her hands groaning to claw out the man's throat. Spirit nations. Long ago, this place used to be called the Elemental Nations. She felt her heart stop at that. The Elemental Nations. That was impossible. The Elemental Nations disappeared from the map centuries ago. The Spirit King was said to have thrown a fit when that happened, both worried and frustrated that a whole island could disappear and not a single soul appeared in Soul Society that day besides clueless ones. What happened here? She asked as she saw another soul pass her. What happened? Well, I'll give you the quick overview. We all died. All of you. The whole nations. He nodded sadly. We were in a war at the time and most of us were already killed off by someone named Madara. She nodded. That man was locked away deep inside Soul Society for repeated attempts to take over the afterlife. Finally having enough, they threw him into the deepest prison they had and stripped him of all his abilities, paralyzing him from the neck down. Namikaze-sama killed him, but at a price. Everyone died. He still blames himself as he's the only one who didn't die, but he became something much worse. What can be worse than dying? She whispered, remembering her own death. She had been accused as a witch and burned alive. She shivered at the memory before calming herself. Kakashi eyed her out of the corner of his eye, having seen the shiver before looking straight again. He became a demon. Her steps stopped and her eyes widened. A demon. Surely he meant a hollow, right? But he said that this Namikaze man didn't die, so he couldn't be a hollow. Demons couldn't exist. They were only stories told in history to scare Shinigami into practicing and being cautious around hollow. She looked at him, hoping he was joking. Seeing his serious eyes, her heart sank. Could the Soul Society handle a demon? He'd a deity-type demon. He's a guardian, he's a destroyer, he's a god, he's the Hyakubi no Ukami, the hundred-tailed wolf. She felt her skin crawl at the name as she started to follow him again. Would he be mad at her for falling into his domain without permission? He gulped and felt fear well up inside of her. She never wanted to face a demon. Hollows were bad enough, but a demon. She shuddered at the thought. The two stopped at large double doors. Kakashi turned to her. He may not like the rules of royalty, but we make it a habit to use them around him. Do not speak unless spoken to. Address him as Lord, Sir, King, or Sama. Keep things short and to the point, and don't make him wait. Are we clear? She gulped, nodded, bracing herself to meet this demonic king. Relax, he doesn't bite often. Kakashi chuckled, pushing open the double doors and stepping to the side. Well, what do we have here? The first things Matsumoto saw were fangs, glowing red eyes, and the multitude of tails flowing around the throne. Matsumoto couldn't help but blush at the unworldly creature before her. No hollow could emit such warmth and light. Her eyes shot over his being, from his muscles built for speed to each golden tip of his spiky hair. He was definitely not a human, his looks just couldn't be mortal. The blonde's lips twitched and raised an eyebrow at her, very open, staring with amusement in his enchanting blue eyes that she was sure were once a bloody red. She blushed as she realized her staring and looked away. Matsumoto wasn't a shy woman and she knew this, yet the way he looked at her caused embarrassment to instantly build up inside her. So, you're a Shinigami. His voice was calm and had a rusty edge to it. She breathed in, reminding herself of her position. She couldn't let the demon seduce her, at least not right now. She felt like hitting herself at that thought. Bad Rangiku, she scolded in her head. Wanting to be seduced by a demon was like a soul just walking straight up to a hungry hollow. It wasn't a good idea. Yes, I am, she said, holding back a squeak when she realized the doors behind her were closed and that silver-haired man was gone. He hummed and crossed his legs, his eyes analyzing her. Funny, you're not what I'd pictured. She blinked before she glared, causing his eyebrow to rise higher. What are you implying, Namikaze-sama? She hissed. He smirked at the mock in her voice. Nothing, my dear, nothing at all. I've met one Shinigami before and he didn't look human. Always had that knife in his mouth, he did. She stared at him for a moment before it hit her. She'd heard of the legends. She'd heard of the being that could seal demons and ruled over the all souls, the Spirit King. No, that was impossible. The Spirit King wouldn't converse with demons, it was illogical, dangerous. It had to be a somewhat normal Shinigami who appeared to console the souls of the elemental nations when they all perished. Yes, that had to be it. She jumped slightly when the demon stood, watching with wide eyes as the tails combined and formed to 10. His eyes never left her. It seems we have put off introductions. I'm Namikaze Uzumaki Naruto, the Hyakubi no Ukami. And you are? Matsumoto Rangiku. He nodded. Now what, pray tell, are you doing here in the Spirit Nations, Matsumoto-san? It was a mistake. I did not mean to interrupt your daily life. It's not interrupted at all, Matsumoto-san, I assure you. You're actually the most interesting thing that's happened since that dragon 200 years ago. Seriously, did you know they still exist? He asked, though rhetorical. She nodded, not very surprised. Tushiro's Zanpakuto was a dragon, and if there's a spirit of a dragon there had to be a living dragon sometime in life. Fun creatures they are. Riding them is a thrill, take it from me. Try it sometime, he said, gliding down the steps before his throne. Now what was this mistake? Must you know? I'm the ruler of the spirit nations, my dear. It's my job to know. Be it dangerous or not, I must be aware of it. His voice was serious with an edge as sharp as a sword. I don't know the details myself. Try your best, Matsumoto-san. What do you remember? Nothing really happened. A creature showed up in the gate started to close, I ripped a hole in it, and here I am. I don't know how it happened. There, happy. She crossed her arms, leveling a glare at him. He blinked owlishly at her, not sure if he had really heard her snap or not, before grinned. That's quite an interesting story you got there, my dear. I'm compelled to call you a liar. She opened her mouth to yell at him. She was no liar. Avoid the subject and choose not to hear maybe, but she didn't lie. However, he held up his hand to keep her quiet, and that's when she realized how close he was. He had stopped his descent towards her when they were only a few feet apart. She felt her cheeks heat up but pushed the feeling down. But I believe you. I can sniff out a lie very easily. You have not lied to me since you entered those doors, so I do not see you as a threat. Relax, my dear, you're a guest in my home. Will you stop calling me, my dear? Why do you do that anyway? He shrugged. No reason not to. Kakashi is waiting outside. He'll guide you back to your room and have a meal prepared for you. As long as you are here, you're not a prisoner but a guest. Are you really a demon? She couldn't hold the question in any longer. It spilled from her lips before she could stop herself. Her fingers flexed, desperately wanting to strangle herself, but she somehow figured it wouldn't work out in her favor. The smile from his lips fell into the form of a frown, all friendliness disappearing, and she tensed. I am what I am, my dear. Yes, I am a demon, but not like those soul-lusting fools who crave for nothing but power and sex. I'm more powerful than them and have no such urges. I am a deity type, a protector and destroyer, but a demon nonetheless. She nodded, not finding her voice. So he really was a demon and there were more out there. That didn't spell well for Soul Society. They already had enough trouble with hollows. They didn't need any more trouble with demons. She did notice the sadness in his voice. Remembering what she was told, that he didn't become a demon by choice, she almost felt bad for him. I have a question, Namikaze-sama. Please, call me Naruto. I prefer it. I don't honorifics with my people or special guests. He smiled. What would you like to know? 2 things, actually. Where'd all your tails go? He chuckled. I should have expected that. It's honestly hard to get around with 100 tails flowing behind me. I suppress my power and therefore the number of tails is reduced. The more I release, the more tails I gain. It's quite simple, really. Next question. She nodded, finding herself understanding. Why have you renamed the elemental nations the spirit nations? Does it have something to do with that silver-haired soul? He said you all died. His smile fell again. Ah, that Kakashi, letting things spew from his mouth again without thinking. Yes, we all died, my dear. Most of the people couldn't move on, and thus the spirit nations were formed, and they appointed me as their leader, their king. Many of us are much happier than we were in life. She couldn't say anything to that. Souls need to move on to the Soul Society or they would become hollows, yet that Kakashi character had been dead for over 1,000 years and he has yet to show any signs of the whole appearing. It's only right for people to move on. What could be keeping them here for so long? She knew that if the Soul Society ever caught whiff of this place they wouldn't hesitate to try and console all they could, and she knew they would find out eventually. How'd they all die? Kakashi-san said you blame yourself. He flinched a little before sighing. It was my fault in a way. True, Madara did kill many of us, but there were many nations that weren't touched by his tyranny yet. When was still human I had a demon sealed inside of me, the strongest of its time, the Kyuubi no Kitsune. Her eyes widened. She'd heard of the time when the Spirit King would seal demons into humans, and the worst of the time, Kyuubi. They'd be beaten, scorned, and seen as demons themselves, and many times killing them before they reached puberty. She'd heard the Spirit King dreaded sealing the Biju into babies, and when they died he took the souls of them himself and placed them in a paradise where even hollows of all levels can't reach. When I killed Madara I had all the demons sealed inside of myself to free them from his control. However, I didn't expect them to combine into their original entity, the Jubi. He knew he would never out of me, so he decided to make me a Biju, the strongest to ever exist. He combined us together, making me the Jubi, but he felt I didn't have enough power. He started to steal the life from all those around me, but it still wasn't enough. He stole it from everyone in the elemental nations, everyone. By the time he was satisfied, I was the Hyakubi and everyone was dead. He's but a voice in my head now, but the damage has already been done. She felt pity well up in the pit of her stomach before she pushed it down. Pity was something he did not need, or sympathy. I'm sorry, she whispered. How do you feel now that you know the truth? Do you blame me? I don't. I feel sorry for you and the innocents, but I don't blame you. I blame the Jubi though. You're just another innocent that was affected by a demon, she murmured, not finding her voice very strong after hearing that story. He blinked and smiled at her. Haven't heard it put that way before, me being a victim. He said softly, what about you? How did you die? She shivered, remembering the burning sensation on her skin. I was alive during the Salem witch trials. I was one of the most sought-after women of the time, not that you can blame them. She said proudly, flaunting her oversized knees and loving the blush she received. However, since my personality was a little out there, considered unacceptable or a woman at that time, and a lot of women were jealous, I was accused of being a witch. I was burned at the stake after being tortured for a month. I had a horrible death. I changed my name to Matsumoto Rangiku to help forget about that past. I don't even remember my birth name anymore. Naruto nodded. I've heard of those times. Tragic really. I've met a few witches in my life and I have to tell you I'm fond of them. They're nothing like the wrinkled evil creatures people make them out to be. They're rather beautiful and refined. He smiled, drifting off into a memory, and Rangiku finally noticed his youth. He didn't look a day over 18. She scolded herself for being so preoccupied to actually examine him more closely. He was so young when all this happened. Well, he was older than her right now, but he was still young in looks. Dad, two twin voices called out. Matsumoto blinked and suddenly there were two identical boys clinging to Naruto. She couldn't help but admire their speed. From the looks of them they were around 12, 13 tops, but she couldn't be too sure with just their looks. After all, Naruto was thousands of years old and he merely looked like a teenager. They had spiky blonde hair, styled shorter than Naruto's, which went to his neck, and violet eyes with slit pupils like their father. They had gray wolf ears adorned atop of their heads, and they each had 5 gray fox tails swaying behind them. They grinned up at him and she saw that they each adorned fangs as their canine teeth. What have I told you two about entering the throne room when I'm in a meeting? He scolded, eyeing them. The two pouted in unison. Not to come in. They spoke together. That's right. He looked up at Matsumoto, who was looking at them confused, and he smiled. Matsumoto-san, meet Nagato and Yahiko, my sons. She smiled at them. Hi, I'm Dad. Who's this old hag? Naruto blinked, snorted, and held back his laughter. A vein in Matsumoto's forehead pulsed and she narrowed her eyes angrily at one twin, Yahiko. She smiled demonically and spoke through clenched teeth. My name is Matsumoto Rangiku. Boys, that wasn't very nice, Naruto said with amusement laced in his voice. Matsumoto glared at him, which he expertly ignored. Apologize. The two looked her. Sorry, they said. Their voices and expressions were saying that they felt the opposite of their word. Nagato, Yahiko, Matsumoto-chan is our guest. Matsumoto-chan, she thought with a blush. Since when was she a chan? Where's your brother? He's supposed to be watching you. The blonde demon asked, looking around. Their grins widened. We used the art of stealth, Nagato began. To escape his grasp and sight. We wanted, Yahiko said. To see you. Matsumoto raised an eyebrow. They were finishing each other's sentences as if they had one mind. She nearly squealed but kept her cool. After all, she was in front of royalty. Of course, if this was in front of her Taiko, she wouldn't hesitate to squeal. She'd even do it in front of the Saotaicho. However, these were demons and royalty, so she kept her inner child detained. There you are, a pissed voice called out. Matsumoto turned and saw a seemingly 16-year-old boy stomping towards them with an inhuman grace, his right eyebrow twitching ever so slightly with suppressed rage. He stopped a few feet away and she had the chance to examine him. He had red hair, And not just red, but it looked like he took a bath in blood, kind of red, which reached his shoulder blades and was pulled into a low ponytail. His eyes were the amazing blue that Naruto had with slit pupils. He had red wolf ears and 9 tails of the same color. He radiated power, much less than Naruto, but it was still nearly overwhelming. I turn my back on you annoying monkeys for 1 second and you vanish. And what next? I find you with Dad while he's in a meeting. The redhead hissed. Kyuubi, Naruto said in a calm voice, trying to soothe his irate son. Kyuubi, but I thought he was. Rangiku trailed off, not sure if he was dead or not, but he surely was not out of Naruto as the Jubi was trapped inside him. Got a problem with my name, lady? Kyuubi growled. Calm down, Kyuubi, she's our guest, the king emphasized, turning to face his son. It was an expected question, Q. The redhead huffed and crossed his arms. I was their first child, I have red chakra, I have the same personality as his former demon prisoner, and thus I was dubbed, Kyuubi. Mortals and their pointless questions. He muttered. Matsumoto felt like she should be insulted, but for some reason she couldn't find it in herself to be. Kyuubi and I got close during the war, Naruto said, shaking his head at his son's antics towards her. That's probably another reason why the Jubi felt compelled to give me power. Kyuubi always wanted me to become a demon, whether it was to escape or another reason I'll never know now. However, I wanted something to remember him by, and then this charming young pup was born and was so much like my former prisoner in power, looks, and personality. Kyuubi was the perfect name for him. Doesn't bother me, Kyuubi said with a fanged grin. I like being named after such an admirable and powerful demon. I may be only half demon and a wolf, not a fox, but I'm equal to him in power. The tails prove it. To emphasize this he gave an exaggerated yet graceful wag of his tails. She rolled her eyes and huffed, causing him to raise a crimson eyebrow. Don't get ahead of yourself, brat. There's still someone who can seal you away if you get arrogant. He's my boss. Kyuubi blinked before chuckling and raising his hands in surrender. I understand. Don't mess with the fiery hag. Lady was bad enough, but if one more person calls me an old hag again, there will be blood. She hissed, slowly reaching for her sword. She really wanted to hurt Kyuubi, she really wanted to, but she doubted it was a good idea with his powerful daddy watching. Naruto grinned widely, showing off his sharp fangs, and chuckled. I like you, Matsumoto-chan. Stay as long as you like. She blushed at his word before shaking her head. I can't stay. Despite how uncaring my Taiko acts, I know he's really worried right now. Besides, I left my sake stash in his desk, and if he finds it before I get back, then I'll be in a lot of trouble. Naruto laughed. Sake? Huh, well, we'll work on getting you back, but until then, Kakashi. Get Matsumoto-chan some sake. He called out. A poof sound being heard after signaling the silver-haired man's departure. How much sake are we talking about? The king's smile widened. More than you can ever drink. I think I might just love you. Let's drink. She cheered, jumping into the air, Hermes following her enthusiastically, at the thought of an endless supply of sake and no one berating her when she got drunk. But Dad, you said that you'd take us into town and help us buy birthday gifts for our mothers. Matsumoto smiled at them, enthusiastic about shopping, before she remembered the last part. Mothers, she voiced, mostly to herself. When she realized she said it out loud, she slapped a hand against her mouth. Yes, mothers, Kyuubi said uninterested as he picked some dirt out from under his nails. As in plural. So, you're not born from the same mother. Yahiko shook his head. Kyuubi's mother isn't ours. We have the same dad though. We have 4 mothers, Nagato said, holding up 4 clawed fingers. Yahiko and my mother is Anko, Kyuubi's mother is Mei, Chrono and Yuki's mother is Hinata, and I's is Samui. In other words, Dad has a harem with girls he loves and 2 dweebs over there, and I am half brothers. Kyuubi said. Stop that. Naruto blushed, glaring at his children. And don't name call your little brothers, Q. The 9-tailed wolf shrugged. Whatever. Chrono, Yuki, I. Matsumoto asked, confused about who those people are. Our half-siblings. Kyuubi interpreted. So, you have a harem. Yes I do, though it's more of a large family than anything else. The children love their mothers and are happy, we're all happy. Naruto said with a blissful smile on his face. Suddenly, Kakashi appeared in the room with an eye smile and armfuls of sake. Yo! Good job Kakashi, Naruto applauded. Yes, good job Kakashi. The twins shouted, reaching for the sake but were grabbed by the wolf ear by their father and pulled away. You're not having that, but we're way old enough to drink it by mortal laws. But you aren't mortal, you're demons and you're still far from passing the demon restriction. But Kyuubi and Chrono can. Yahiko complained. They're old enough. It's not fair, Nagato screamed, reaching for the sake. Just one sip. No. The king shook his head. Kakashi, do me a favor and bring them to their mother. Kakashi's eyes smiled again as he put the sake down. Of course. He grabbed onto the collars of their shirts. Bye. He vanished in a puff of smoke. Care to join us Kyuubi? Naruto asked, turning away from the sparkling Matsumoto who was eyeing the drinks as if they were gods. Kyuubi shook his head. I'd love to but mom has something to speak to me about. I might join you later. He said, looking at Matsumoto then back at his father, smirking, then spinning on his heel and walking away. How much can I have? All of it. Please say yes. No. She whined with a pout. Why not? He grinned. Because I'm having some. Anko blinked as her two children appeared before her, were dropped by Kakashi who waved before disappearing. She looked at Samui, Yuki, Chrono, and I who were joining her for tea and sake with a confused expression which they shared, not offering her any insight on what just happened. The twins flinched when they saw the room looking at them. Anko's eyes were narrowed, almost glaring while Samui stared at them with a blank look. Chrono, a seemingly 14-year-old boy with purple-black hair, slit violet eyes, with black wolf ears and 7 black tails, was staring at them with an almost impassive and bored look, yet there was also amusement, as if knowing the beating they were going to get from their mother. Yuki, a seemingly 12-year-old girl with black hair, lavender eyes, with silver wolf ears and 5 silver tails stared at him with a confused look on her face, her head tilted to the side like a curious animal. Yet, she had a knowing smile on her face like her brother. A girl of seemingly 8 with blonde hair, brown eyes and brown wolf ears with 2 tails was the only one who seemed completely lost at the moment. Her eyes were narrowed in confusion and her ears twitching every so often, trying to comprehend the situation. Hey mom, the two said in unison, taking the other's hand for comfort as they knew what was go come. Why in Kami's name were you dropped off here by Kakashi of all people? She asked with narrowed eyes. Well, we went to see Dad and, Yahiko began but he never got to finish as a kunai came speeding for his head. He dodged, hiding behind his equally quivering twin. Their mother glared at them. I've told you time and time again that you are not to disturb your father while he's in a meeting. It could have been important. When he's in the throne room you don't go in unless you're called or it's an emergency. Sorry, Nagato stuttered. Dad just promised to take us into town and, now it was his turn to dodge a kunai. I don't care about your reasoning. Clam yourself, Anko, Samui said, sipping some tea. Easier said than done, she hissed. Your child knows not to disturb Naruto when he's in there and she's younger than the twins. She looked at then at Chrono and Yuki. Hanatas are the same. Chrono snorted. Not our fault your children are incompetent. Hey, I wasn't blaming you personally, Chrono. Not that you're a good role model either. She narrowed her eyes at him. He glared at her. You're not exactly mother of the year either, Anko. How come you're nice to everyone but me? She snapped. He smiled at her. Because you're fun to mess with, Mom. She mumbled something inaudible under her breath, crossing her arms and pouting while Chrono grinned in triumph in winning this round. You were saying, Yuki said, gesturing for them to continue. Well, that woman, what was her name? Yahiko looked at his twin. Matsumoto I believe, Nagato mused, tapping his chin in thought. Matsumoto wanted sake so father sent Kakashi to get it. We wanted it too so we tried to get some. After all, we're half human and have already passed the human age requirements. Dad, however, saw it differently and had Kakashi drop us off here. Nagato finished. So, was she pretty? Anko asked with a sly smile. The two grinned. She's got the biggest bust I've ever seen, bigger than Tsunade Ba-chan's, they said in unison. What else besides bust? Yuki asked, not liking the fact that her brothers brought that part up first. Is her hair long? What color? What's her eye color? Is she thin? What's she like? Who is she? I bounced on her chair. The twins looked at each other, grinned, then looked back at her. Yes. Strawberry blonde. Stormy gray. Yes. Hyper and unique. The twins' smiles grew wider as they said the final answer together. She's a Shinigami. Enko's mouth dropped open slightly while Samui just blinked before sighing, knowing that this'll lead to nothing but trouble. Matsumoto grinned happily with a drunk flush as she skipped down the halls. That king really knew how to drink. He tied her in a drinking contest and she was Seoul Society's best at holding her liquor. Finally she had some competition, one who wouldn't look down on her just because she was a woman. She loved it. She stopped and looked around, realizing she had no idea where she was or how to get back to her room. She had left too quickly and without asking her way back. Kakashi wasn't around to lead her and there were no signs to direct her. She was completely lost. She pouted, her shoulders slumping. How did she always end up in these situations? She huffed at herself and turned a corner only to slam into something hard and fall backwards. Ow, she groaned, looking up to see another woman on the ground, one around 18 or so. She had beautiful long black hair and lavender pupil-less eyes. Her chest was smaller than hers but it was still impressive for the average woman. She was definitely a soul, a powerful one at that, due to the feeling she received. However, she didn't have a chain which made Matsumoto curious to no end. Only souls who went through Kanso or passed on have no chain. Yet she obviously hasn't done either. The woman looked up. Ah, sorry. Her voice was soft yet had a strong and beautiful sound to it. Are you all right? Yeah, I'm fine, she smiled, jumping up. A little fall like that's nothing. The raven-haired girl smiled as she stood up herself. I'm glad. I'm Namikaze Uzumaki Hinata. Ah, so you're one of the four mothers. Hinata blinked before smiling again. You must be our guest. You gave Naruto-kun quite a scare there. You appeared in our bedroom out of nowhere in the middle of the night. You startled him awake while the rest of us awoke to his startled cry. She giggled at the memory. Matsumoto's flush increased. Sorry about that, it was an accident that led to that event. She shook her head. No need to apologize. Are you lost? You're headed towards the spa. The spa, yes. Where exactly is the spa? Hinata giggled again before pointing behind her. At the end of the hallway. It is the door at the end. You can't miss it. She squealed. Spa, here I come. She raced down the hallway. What? Kyubi asked with wide eyes, staring at his mother, Mei, in a shocked state. You heard me. She beamed, bouncing on the balls of her heels. Isn't it wonderful? Yes, I'm just surprised. I didn't expect this from anyone for a while. It's very hard for this to happen to a soul after all. He said, shaking his head and blinking away the surprise. He couldn't shake the feeling of, wow, though. What do you think Naruto-kun will do when he hears about this? Dad, he'll be shocked and smile at the same time. His brain will fight between the two and he'll end up doing both. Hey, be nicer to your father. He helped make you. Kyubi shrugged. He doesn't mind. Of course he doesn't. Your father's too nice to you sometimes. Kyubi shrugged again before smiling at her. Do you want me to go with you? She grinned at her son and taking hold of his hand, dragging him towards the door. I wouldn't have it any other way. Toshiro sighed as he stared down at the paperwork piling up on his desk. He was used to the extra work. After all, Matsumoto never did hers without him tying her up and holding her sake bottles as ransom and after a tortuous amount of whining. He constantly found himself missing that hyper-fukitaku of his. His worry, however, was a different story. He was very vexed about her disappearance. Mayuri had been punished in ways he will not say lest he flinch, but punishment still didn't bring her back. Normally, a search for a missing Shinigami wasn't as widespread and lasting as this one. However, her disappearance was inside the gate. Sure, people have died in it, but she tore a hole through it and left alive and they can't find her anywhere. That only added onto his worry. It was like she vanished into thin air. They couldn't find her signature anywhere and that experimental hollow that they recaptured, though in pieces, still couldn't tell them anything about her strange vanishing. Kuchiki Rukia had taken her place in Karakura town for the time being. She was a capable Shinigami, but she lacked the much-needed experience that Matsumoto had. He hoped that she had what it took to take out that hollow, as the one that it previously killed was at her skill level. He sighed again and pinched the bridge of his nose. Things weren't looking good. The door to his office opened and in stepped Yukitake. "Hi, Hitsugaya Taiko," he smiled, reaching into his sleeve. "I brought sweets." "And no, that's okay, I've already had some today." He lied through his teeth, but Yukitake pouted anyway, buying the act. "Too bad, I was sure you'd enjoy what I got you today." "No, it's fine. Anyway, why are you here, Yukitake Taiko?" Tushiro inquired, lacing his fingers together. "I doubt you'd make the journey to my office just to offer me candy." Yukitake nodded, all playfulness suddenly gone. "Correct. We've lost contact with Kuchiki Rukia an hour ago." Tushiro stared at his fellow white-haired captain before sighing yet again. "Is she dead?" "No," he said, gaining the smaller captain's attention. "She's very much alive, but her signature has lessened and another signature, much larger than hers ever was, appeared near her when he lost contact." Tushiro's eyes narrowed. "Did she do what I think she did?" He shrugged. "It's currently unknown, though we do have our suspicions. It's being investigated as we speak." "And Matsumoto?" "No leads so far." Hitsugaya huffed. "I doubt Mayuri is doing anything anyways." "Oh, on the contrary, he's working very hard. Not only is the Saotaicho breathing down his neck about this, but he's finding himself curious about what happened to her and where she disappeared to. I haven't seen him this motivated in a long time. Is that a good thing or a bad thing?" "It's both." Tushiro shook his head and leaned back in his chair, tapping his finger on his desk in irritation. "Nothing about this makes sense." "I didn't say I did. No one has ever done what she did in the gate before, so we have nothing to go on. We'll find her, Hitsugaya Taiko, but it'll take time. I trust you're right then, as you've never steered me wrong before." "Don't make my trust waver, Yukitake Taiko." Yukitake smiled. "Never." Hinata walked into the throne room and saw Naruto staring at a glass of sake, swirling it around in his hand as he slouched on his throne. His eyes were half-lidded and glazed over, showing he was deep in thought. She smiled and went up to him, sitting on one of the four smaller thrones surrounding his large one, two on each side. She placed a hand on his free one and he looked up at her and smiled. "Hinata-chan," he said lovingly, leaning in and giving his wife a kiss. "Hello, Naruto-kun. I just ran into our guest in the hallway." He raised an amused eyebrow. "You did? What did you think of her?" She giggled. "She's hyper, I have to give her that. She's very outgoing and unique, though she did have the feeling of death surrounding her, like us." "She's a Shinigami." Hinata's eyes widened. "A Shinigami? She certainly doesn't look like that one that visits you from time to time." "He's her boss, the Big Daddy Shinigami. They're his subordinates," he said, leaning back with a thoughtful look. "Perhaps he could return her the next time he visits. I would rather not send one of my people out and risk them being taken." "When will he visit again though?" she questioned. "His timing is never the same. It's always when he's bored. One time there was a 100-year gap before he visited again." Naruto sighed, nodding knowingly. That guy always did have a habit of turning up randomly and in the worst of times. "Yeah, but I have to do something. She can't stay here." "Why not?" Naruto blinked, opening his mouth but closing it again. "What do you mean?" he finally asked after a few minutes of gathering his words. "Why can't she stay? There's no reason to leave, is there? She's a Shinigami, Hinata-chan. She's a danger to our people. She could try to have them pass on, and I can't have that, as no one wants to pass on. She wants to go home and I have no reason to deny her that. She knows about us. She could tell. She will tell." His eye hardened, snarling at the air, his teeth sharpening themselves to a point in his anger. "Then let them come. They won't touch anyone and get away with it. If they even suggest it, then there'll be a bloodbath like none other recorded in history." She smiled and squeezed his hand. "That woman, I told you what I thought about her, but what do you think about her?" "Me?" he asked, and she nodded. He smiled. "I find her quite intriguing." "Naruto." A bell-like voice rang out. The king turned and saw Kyuubi holding his smiling mother's hand and her smiling at him. "Yes, my love, Did something good happen? Her smile widened. Yes, Naruto-kun, something very wonderful is happening. What is it? He asked. Hinata, however, saw it instantly and squealed. Is it true? She asked happily, and Mei nodded. She jumped up from her throne and enveloped the woman in a hug. How wonderful. Okay, what's so wonderful that everyone but me has noticed? Naruto, Mei began, her smile practically beaming. I'm pregnant. His eyes widened as a large smile slowly spread across his lips. Matsumoto walked down the castle halls with a large smile on her face, adorned in a soft bathrobe she acquired from the spa. She felt refreshed and completely relaxed, more relaxed than she ever remembered. The hot springs were a miracle compared to the ones in the Soul Society. Maybe she'd stay here a little bit longer than she had planned. After all, it was a vacation from all that paperwork, and the king was wonderful eye candy. The fact that he was a great drinker was just the icing on the cake. You seem happy, kitten. Hinako, she inquired. Where have you been? Asleep. Do you think tearing a hole in the gate only took energy from you? It took more out of me than it did you. Matsumoto huffed and crossed her arms as she walked, not really paying any attention as to where she was going and focused on the conversation with her Zanpakuto. Well, don't blame me. Would you rather have had us get eaten by that thing? I don't think so. You could have, however, found a different way to save us than tearing a hole in the fabric of time and space. Rangiku blinked at that, her brow furrowing. Tearing a hole in the fabric of time and space. Hinako groaned. Listen, this place is protected by a barrier so strong you have to tear a hole in time and space to be able to cross it. This demon that you met is simply that powerful, and I'm surprised that you were able to do such a feat. I don't think the Saotaicho could even do what you did. Even if I'm quite angry with you, I do have to say I'm impressed. Matsumoto smiled at that. Thanks, Hinako. Don't get used to it. I know a fluke when I see it, and what you did was a complete fluke. Simply dumb luck. The Shinigami scowled, her eyes narrowing dangerously. I wonder what would happen if I submerged you in mud for a few days. Hinako gasped. You wouldn't dare. Her voice betrayed her horror. A smug look replaced her scowl. Oh, I more than dare. Hinako grumbled something. Probably an insult, but all fell silent, making Matsumoto grin widely in triumph. What's go you so happy, Matsumoto-chan? She shrieked. Jumping, she turned around to stare at her disturber, her hand on her heart. Naruto, she gasped in surprise. You startled me. He grinned sheepishly, rubbing the back of his neck. Sorry about that. However, your face has changed so much in a few minutes I just had to ask why. She blushed. Ah, Hinako and I were having an argument. Hinako. She reached inside her bathrobe and pulled out her sword, showing it to the Demon King. He gently took it, handling it with expert hands and great care as he examined it from tip to tip. That's Hinako, Matsumoto introduced. She's a sword with a soul. Every Shinigami has one. Ah yes, I believe the Shinigami I know brought it up once in a while. A beautiful sword she is, he said with a smile, admiring her. You are quite lucky, Matsumoto-chan. She huffed. Hardly. She's hard-headed, likes to argue with me at all hours, and always insults my intelligence. I sometimes wonder what got I upset for him to give me her of all Zanpakuto. After time I realized it was a goddess, because what goddess wouldn't be jealous of this? She asked, flaunting her body. Naruto blushed at that and looked everywhere else but her, not seeing the smug smile at the reaction she obtained. Here, he handed her back Hinako. I do have a reason for looking for you. Oh, would you consider joining me for dinner tonight, Matsumoto-chan? He asked with a gentlemanly bow. Or would you prefer to eat in your quarters? She blushed. Was he asking her out on a date? If it was anyone else she'd probably knock them unconscious, but for some reason she really wanted to accept. Sure. I think I'll go. He smiled at her. I'll have Kakashi escort you to the dining hall at 6:30. Why always this Kakashi? He's my every-purpose volunteer. Naruto nodded to himself, liking the description of the silver-haired pervert. Now, can you tell me why you're heading towards the Knights' changing rooms? She blinked, slightly tilting her head to the side. Did she hear right? Knights. He still has them. Then again, she hasn't seen any technology that even the Soul Society has yet. What? She asked curiously. You're heading towards the rooms where the knights change into their armor. It's constantly used, so there's not an hour of the day where a knight's not using it. Naruto grinned slyly. I didn't know you were a peeper, Matsumoto-chan. She blushed and sniffed, trying to keep some dignity after that accusation. I'm not. Then why were you heading straight for it? He asked with a raised eyebrow, gesturing towards the double doors that weren't too far from them. She was horrified to admit that she indeed was heading towards it. She sputtered for a moment before regaining herself. When I talk to Hinako, I tend to pay attention to her and not my surroundings. She admitted. When her Taiko found out, his eyebrow had twitched before sighing and telling her to fix it. She knew she had to, because if it happened in battle she'd be toast. He stared at her, then chuckled, shaking his head in amusement. Well, that's one of the more creative excuses I've heard, but also one of the most likely. It's not an excuse, she hissed, resembling an angry cat. It's the truth. He raised his hands. With 4 wives he knows when he goes too far or steps into forbidden territory. I understand. No need to become an angry kitten. She stopped her cat imitation and flushed. She just hissed at the Demon King. She bowed. Sorry for my behavior. She heard him sigh before calloused yet soft and gentle fingers wrapped around her chin and pulled her from her bow to face him. There's no need for that, Matsumoto-chan. He said with a soft smile. Just be yourself. Forget that I'm a king. I want to see the real you, okay? Feeling her face flush, she nodded. She couldn't remember anyone saying that to her before. If you wish it. He shook his head. It's your choice on how to treat me, Matsumoto-chan. Treat me like a king if you want, but I don't want you to do something because you feel obligated to do it because a king asked it of you. I want you to do it because Naruto asked you to. A soft smile spread across her lips. Please, call me Matsumoto. His grin widened. Matsumoto. He tasted the name and knew he could grow fond of the name. Matsumoto it is then. Can you find your room by yourself or do you need help? She huffed. Of course I can find it on my own. However, I swear that these walls move and change direction, so perhaps your presence shall cause them to stop in this cruel joke of theirs. He stared at her with wide eyes for a moment before he laughed. Very well. He presented his arm to her. I shall grace you with my presence then, my lady. She beamed at him, taking the offered arm and holding it close to her. Good. Behind a corner, 2 identical heads spied on the two with twinkling eyes and large mischievous smiles on their faces. Hey, Nagato. Yes, Yahiko. Do you think we're going to get another mom? It's a possibility. But, judging on their natural instincts with this kind of thing, I don't think they'll be able to do it on their own. The two looked at each other and their grins widened. Well, looks like we'll have to interfere for dear old daddy's benefit. They said, chuckling. Elsewhere, Enko got a feeling that her boys were up to something and crushed the teacup in her hands. She narrowed her eyes. Those two better not be up to something. Since when are they not? Chrono inquired. She glared at him. No, I mean they better not be messing with their father and his guest. The half-demon boy's eyebrows show up. You actually care? Of course I care. I'm their mother. Besides, if they do annoy her enough, she'll report this to her boss. I don't want to bear the shame of having my children sealed inside a baby. Chrono sighed. You really are a loving mother, aren't you? She scowled at him. Rangiku was currently facing a crisis. She wasn't sure if even all of Soul Society could quell it. Her brow twitched and her mind raced. Could she really do this? She glared at the large closet filled to the brim with gorgeous dresses. How did they expect for her to only pick one? Yes, this was a world quandary. Her eyes scanned the rows upon rows of gowns. Perhaps, no, that one was way too pink. She liked pink, sure, but the whole dress. No way in hell. That gold and red one had a nice design. Oh, but that green one was simply stunning. And the purple one was certainly an eye-catcher. Ooh, that blue one would bring out her curves. Sighing, she collapsed onto her bed. How in the world did Naruto expect her to be ready on time when she spent the last hour just trying to pick a dress out of the hundreds that were in there? Absently, she noted that she had to get the name of the designer. She wasn't sure she could live without those dresses now that she's seen them. Grumbling, she jumped to her feet. ready to try again. However, her one-track mind was interrupted when she heard loud knocking on her door. Looking at the clock, she noted she still had an hour until Kakashi came. Pursing her lips, she walked over to the door and opened it up. She raised an eyebrow when she saw it was the twins, one of whom, she couldn't tell which, was carrying a box. "Can I help you?" She looked at the one with the box. "Nagato. I'm Yahiko, but it's us who are going to help you." He smiled. "How? First off, how do you like our dresses?" Nagato asked as he and his twin entered the room. "Oh, they're simply lovely. So lovely in fact that I can't, did you say you're?" The twins grinned at each other. "Consider it a hobby," they said. "We discovered that we are quite good at designing," Yahiko began. "Not as good at sewing though," finished Nagato. "Around half of the dresses in there are our design. Give or take a few, of course." She stared at the two for a moment, completely unresponsive. Her eyes were wide and filled with astonishment and shock. Suddenly, her mouth opened and let out a high-pitched squeal before she glomped them, crushing them in her impressive bust that prevented them from breathing. "I think I might love you," she shouted out, her strong arms keeping the flailing boys from moving around and not noticing their dilemma of needing air. "If you were gods, I'd worship you." Finally, the two managed to teleport to the other side of the room, collapsing and gasping for breath. Slowly, their blue faces started to regain color and they directed horrified looks at the woman. They never thought a bust could suffocate someone. The Shinigami seemed oblivious to this as she picked up the box. "What's this?" she asked, lifting the lid off. When she saw the contents, she gasped. "This is..." The two grinned. "Our own design, just for you." She looked at them with wide eyes. "For me?" Yahiko nodded. "You're the most interesting thing that's happened as of late. We also want to make your stay here comfortable, as well as impress Dad more easily." She blushed. What makes you think I want to impress him?" Nagato scoffed. "Please, it's written all over your face. If you don't believe us, look in the mirror. You look like a girl on her first date with her crush." Yahiko chuckled. She glared at them. "I do like your dad, just not that way." The two looked at each other and shrugged. "Fine, sure. Whatever you say." Their grins reached new proportions. "Mother number 5. She glared at them and grabbed a vase sitting in a corner. "Brats. I told you." She threw it at them, it shattering on the doorframe as the two laughing twins ran out. "I do not like your father like that. You're not very convincing, Matsumoto." "You shut up." Her face flushed. "I don't like him like that," she muttered, looking at the dress. "But this dress is cute." Down the hallway, Nagato and Yahiko looked at each other. "Looks like we've got our work cut out for us, Nagato." "That we do, Yahiko. It's time for Plan B." The two nodded at each other. "Hinata Okaa-san. We need your help." Naruto sat at the head of the large dining table with his head in his hands. He had planned for his wives to be here, but Hinata seemed to remember something important and dragged the others away so it would just be him and Matsumoto. He wondered what was so important that they were missing dinner. Anko, Mei and Samui seemed confused enough. Maybe it was shopping for the new baby. Women seemed to put shopping as a priority above all else. As he was pondering this, Kakashi walked in with a lecherous look in his visible eye. Naruto also noticed that the man wasn't reading his perverted book, which surprised him and scared him on a certain level. He's never not reading that book unless he's serious in battle. He rose an eyebrow at the silver-haired man who simply smiled. Presenting Lady Matsumoto Rangiku, he bowed, moving away from the large doors. When Matsumoto stepped through those doors, he realized why Kakashi wasn't reading that book. The dress was the embodiment of fire itself. The sleeves were shoulder-less, unattached to the dress and skin-tight until after the elbow, where the fabric stretched and grew until it was 1.5 feet long, with the fabric fading from a fiery red to orange and finally a cool gold. Keeping them on her arms were golden bands with a red crystal flower in the middle. The main dress was sleeveless, a deep red, and a low V-neck with small silk flowers outlining the tip, showing off her assets. It hugged her body tightly until it reached her hips, where golden beads were wrapped loosely around her waist. The red flowed out a little past the hips until it stopped, but flowed more down the left and was outlined with the same flowers as the chest area. Protruding from under it was an orange that did the same as the red above it and came to just above her knees but without the flowers. Finally, a golden color peeked out from under that and pooled at the floor. Her necklace was a pure gold choker dangling a large red ruby at the center. Her earrings were golden hoops and a red crystal flower was adorned in her free-flowing hair. Naruto's mouth dropped open in shock. Matsumoto grinned widely. Like what you see, Naruto. The king gulped and nodded, eyeing Kakashi who got the hint and quickly scampered out. He stood up and gestured towards the chair next to him. She smiled, liking his shocked expression and gracefully swept over to him. He pulled the chair out and pushed it back in once she sat down. What a gentleman, Matsumoto complimented as Naruto sat down. Ah, I wish men in Soul Society were more like you. Sure, my Taiko can be quite the gentleman at times but he's always yelling at me. What's your captain like? Naruto asked, curious about this afterlife. She beamed at the mention of him. Oh, I like my Taiko very much. His name is Hitsugaya Toshiro and he has white hair that puts Kakashi's to shame and teal eyes. Unfortunately, he died young, around 12 and he was still short for his age so he's rather sensitive about that. Naruto nodded. The curse of those that die. It's the fact that you don't age that's one of the worst parts of death. Life is always changing but the dead no longer. Being a demon there's little changes as well. When you think about it it's quite depressing. Things that don't change are oh so boring. He sighed before smiling at her. Sorry, please continue. She nodded, smiling in agreement. The dead rarely change. Soul Society was still stuck in the past on many levels. She's watched the living world change time and time again while they sit with the same routine and traditions they had the past few hundred years. Well, Taiko has a colder demeanor than most but he's very caring. Except when it comes to paperwork or work in general, then he's a slave driver. She groaned. But he's a good man. He died freezing to death, a way just as horrible as getting burned. His Zanpakuto is a powerful ice dragon called Hiranmara. He's younger than me even by death days yet he's much more powerful than me. He's a prodigy. He smiled. You seem to think very highly of this Toshiro. She nodded. I do. I respect him more than anyone else in Soul Society, that's why I listen to him, on occasion. She added absently. Anyway, your twins have a wonderful fashion sense. He blinked before gaining a knowing smile. Ah, they designed that didn't they? She nodded. Yep. When I get back I do hope they'll send me more. He frowned. You know, he began, making sure he had her attention. You don't have to go back. She looked at him, surprised. What, you can stay here? He added, clarifying what he meant. She smiled sadly. As much as I'd love to I have duties. I can't just leave them. I'm a Shinigami to the end and I shall be to the end of my days. He nodded. Very admirable. However, my offer still stands. I feel like I can trust you. Anytime you change your mind just tell me. The spirit nations will welcome you in open arms. Thanks but I'm pretty sure I won't change my mind. My heart is set on being a Shinigami. You never know, he said mysteriously. The spirit nations have a way of changing the hearts of others. Her eyebrows shot up. What do you? Ah, the food is here. Turning, her mouth started to water when she saw all the glistening masterpieces headed towards them. Her bliss grew when she saw two servants brining in wine and sake. Matsumoto. Yes. He smiled kindly at her, causing her heart to skip a beat. Help yourself to whatever and how much you want. Outside the room, 4 people spied in. Anko, Hinata, Mei and Samui had smiles on their faces as they watched the events unfold. Yahiko and Nagato, however, were tied up in a corner with pouts on their lips. Why are we tied up? They asked. Because you're trying to interfere with the affairs of the heart. Their mother snapped. But now you're going to interfere. You started it so there's nothing wrong with me finishing it. Anko answered unconcernedly. I need to meet his woman. Mei said. I have a feeling I'm going to like her. Hinata nodded. I ran into her and from the few words we exchanged I already like her. Why were you trying to get the two together again? Samui asked, looking at the two. Their pouts disappeared and were replaced by smiles. We like her. And we were bored. So far, Operation Beauty and the Handsome Beast is a success. The two said happily. Anko sighed. shaking her head in shame at her children's actions. What do you mean you don't know? Hitsugaya snapped, glaring across the room at Mayuri. Once again a captain's meeting had been called. This one was to report on the conditions of the disappearance of Matsumoto Rangiku. Mayuri glared at the small Taiko and huffed. Like I said, we haven't picked up her signature anywhere and I cannot fathom what happened in the gate. There's no trail, nothing. The only thing I can think of is if she tore a hole in the fabric of time and space, and we all know that that's impossible, so as a result I don't know where she is. Track her. It's not that hard. You're a fool, Hitsugaya Taiko. You can't track something if there's nothing to track. Calm down, Tushiro-kun. Aizen said calmly. And you, Mayuri Taiko, I honestly don't think you've been working hard enough. Mayuri glared at the captain, his eyes narrowed. What was that? You admitted defeat so easily. It makes me wonder if you even tried. Of course I did, Mayuri growled. However, excuses are unlike you. Aizen's grin widened. Mayuri grit his teeth. Just you watch, he declared. I'll find the little tramp easily. Hitsugaya glared at Mayuri for how he addressed his vice captain before eyeing Aizen. He never liked the man. There was just something about him that set the small captain off, his warning bells ringing so loudly in his ears that he rarely hears anyone else speak to him when he's in the presence of this man. Now, there's no need to speak that way about Matsumoto. Jin commented with that creepy smile on his face that made half the room shiver. So, the results? Saotaicho Yamamoto inquired. Mayuri sniffed. Still in progress. Be sure that you make it quick. It's time Matsumoto is brought home. Oh, it will be, the stark white captain said, narrowing his eyes into a nasty glare at Aizen. Faster than you can blink. Now, we have one more matter to discuss. Yamamoto said seriously. Mayuri Taiko, has Rukia done what we feared? It seems so, but we're working on confirming it now. I see, the Saotaicho pondered. Let us discuss her fate if she has indeed done what we fear. The end. Now we will see you in the next video.